Hello, welcome to Instructional Design from the Ground Up. And Denise, a very special podcast today, and that is because
we have hit our 150th video.
150, can you believe it? And they said we wouldn't make it.
Well, the beginning stages were a little rough and rocky. We recorded our promo open video there were 10 lines to it, and we couldn't get past it in several hours of recording. But here we are, 150 videos later.
And, it was funny because we tried to script things and we had, all kinds of technical stuff. And so now we just get on to do it. We found out that doing it live was easier than trying to record it with a script. So
that's, I think, how we got past that hurdle is we're like, screw it, let's just go live and we mess up. Let's just have fun, laugh at each other.
Even if nobody showed up, we were there. We were entertaining ourselves anyway. But we do appreciate everybody being part of this, and it means a lot to us. And just remember, we're not monetized. We're not doing this for any other reason than to help our students, to create a community for us all to talk about instructional design, learning design, and all those kind of things. And if any of these videos help you out, then we are very happy about that, because that's what it's all about. So 150 is going to be about objectives, Denise. And my gosh, I mean, remember the first time we talked about ABCD and you were sitting in class, and I know your eyes were fuzzing over thinking this can't be that difficult, right?
Well, yeah, the ABCD, don't let that fool you. It doesn't mean it's going to be simple like that. That's what I kind of knew that, because the first assignment you ever gave to me in my first ever class was write out the instructions to an alien if they were going to be making a cup of tea, and they had no concept of it at all. So
no concept. Yeah.
I had 50 steps later. And so I knew that when you said, let's talk about ABCD elements now, I knew it wasn't going to be so simple.
Well, it's deceivingly on the surface looks simple, right? Everybody that doesn't know this and is not a professional designer or spending time looking at it makes assumptions about the complexity of what we do. And it's very easy to gloss over how deep this stuff really is. There's a reason for all the things we do. And even though they may not be obvious, and ABCD as a surface, like, why do you need 4? And what if we told them that some people have 5 and 6 elements for objectives? So people take this seriously. First of all, a behavioral objective is what we are doing as designers to place a learner in a situation at the end of the experience of what they will be able to do and to what degree they'll be able to do it. So not only this is what they're going to do, but this is how well they'll be able to do it. And that sounds very simple, but then you start to break up the component parts of making a cup of tea, or even a carrying machine, doing a K-cup coffee. That there's steps to that. And if you're going to teach it, you have to cover all those steps, don't you? And you have to do all these things. So let's go through the ABCDs very quickly. It's not going to be a long video this time, but let's look at the basics, just some things to think about. And the other framework for objectives, I think it's important, Denise, is this idea that not only is it about writing objectives, it's also about thinking about design. So these are really place markers for important things you need to think about before you get started with the actual work of putting your course together or your program together. So audience, behavior, condition, degree. We'll go in that order because ABCD, right? That's not complicated. So audience. So if you looked at our video on NOP analysis, this is the same as population, essentially, only at a little bit greater detail. But why do we care about audience in an objective, Denise? I mean, why do we think that's important?
Well, if you don't know who you're teaching to, it's going to be really hard to understand and know what their needs are and if there are prerequisites, if they speak English, if they
little things, sure.
Little things like that. You take it for granted, but you can't take that for granted, because you cannot. We have diverse populations, and it's really important to know who your audience is.
And I remember when I was teaching in class, and there was someone there who was very experienced in instructional design, very experienced, and probably could have taught the course as well or better than I at that point. And we started in on the very basic things, which you have to do because there's no prerequisites in most graduate programs for instructional design. You just show up. So we were talking about objectives and ABCD, and I was talking about the audience element and how important it was and how overlooked it is. Most people just ignore it. Even good designers ignore it at their own peril. And he started thinking about that. I could see his eyes. They were just kind of giving her one of these. He was thinking about it. And he came back in the next week and he said, you know what? I thought this was really simplistic. I thought I was going to be bored to tears sitting through these early weeks in the course because this is kind of basic stuff. And then he said, I thought about audience and I realized I had messed this up so many times because I didn't go to the step of actually thinking about how I was going to write these objectives and what that meant. And his example was in finance, and they were putting together courses for banks, people that works in banks, so tellers and managers and everyone that would be there. And what they were doing is wholesaling their population. So everybody within a location took a course. So managers, banking is very fond of vice presidents. So the vice presidents in the branch and the managers and the tellers and everyone else in there were taking the same courses. And he was getting horrible reviews on them. And he finally figured out that the majority of the people taking these introductory courses didn't need them. And that was an audience issue. And if he would have spent some time thinking about audience, then he could have eliminated a lot of the issues that he was having. So if you look at this simplistically, it's very good to just, okay, do I really know who these people are? What's their motivation? Do they have language skills that we can use? What are their expectations about what they bring in as prerequisites? And all these other things. And as a designer, even if you just do this in your head, Denise, I mean, just do fast math like in an op. Think, okay, I want to make sure I've got at least a good handle on this, even though I can't spend weeks in analysis on the population. Can I feel pretty comfortable about who these folks are?
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, I'm running into that with a course I'm developing right now for personal branding, how to personal brand. And looking at the audience, I really had to spend some time on that because who am I trying to target? I mean, I can't be targeting everybody out there in the world, even though I'm like, everybody needs a personal brand.
Yeah,
no,
but
that's not.
yeah, maybe they do, but that's different than who you can have in your class. These people that aren't experienced at all, that have a year's experience, have 10 years experience. These things are important to you as designers. So as we do audience, spend a second with it. Just think about it. If you can't do it formally, you don't have the resource, you don't have the time, at least make sure that you lock in. And the other thing I'll say is don't take anybody else's word on what a population is. And I can assure you that most boards and managers really don't understand or appreciate their population that we're putting courses together for in an instructional design sense. So, listen to what people tell you, but do your work. Make sure that you have actually found out what these folks are doing.
Yeah. So the next one, B, behavior.
Yeah, behavior. Right. So this one, pretty simple, instructional design wise. What do you want them to be able to do? And the thing about behaviors is you want them to be one behavior when you're writing an objectives. So don't try to combine behaviors. Don't say, well, they're going to be able to do this, 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 and this. Well, that's fine, but that's this, and this separate objectives because these are all different. And when you go to evaluate, you're going to have a real problem if you don't have separate objectives. So people think, that's too complicated. I don't have time to do that. But you will thank us later when you get into something that's pretty sophisticated and you find out that you can't really evaluate well and you can't even really define well what each separate part of this objective is about. So behaviors, just make sure it's one single act, one thing you want them to be able to do, make sure it's observable and measurable. And it's really not any more complicated than that, but this can be days, weeks, months of work, just writing behavior.
I was going to say with my learners, it seems to be that whole behavior seems to be the hardest thing to write a behavior that is measurable and observable. The words understand and learn have no place in them, and they want to stick those in there. They want to stick those words. So that's, and it's really important to drive that point home. Do not use subjective verbs.
So if I find any of you using understand in an objective, I will find you. it just gets to observable, measurable. It has to be something tangible.
Yeah.
So conditions, this is one thing a lot of designers never heard of. I'm sure you never heard of conditions when you started doing this, and I certainly hadn't.
No, I didn't really think about. It wasn't something that was in my repertoire. It's not something I thought about, but boy, do I think about it now.
Yeah, conditions. Those are the tangible things that you provide learners within the learning space.
Handouts, computers, lectures.
Anything. And the reason this becomes incredibly important in professional learning design is because you now have performance agreement issues. So if you have an entire population that can't do something that they need to be able to do, you need to be able to go back and say, okay, did I create the right environment for them to be able to do this? And the best example of this that I have, and I know you've heard it before, but I think it's worth repeating, is when a community college had an agreement with a local hospital system to train nurses when there was a real nursing shortage, and they just couldn't get enough people. So they said, we need to have our own program so we can get recruits in here. We can train them to be nurses. We can get them into the hospitals, get them on bedside, get the things we need to do. And there's a lot of money that they put into this. And what they were finding out is most of the nurses that started working actually in facility couldn't do a lot of the things they needed them to do. And so we went in and did a forensic examination of what was going on. We found out that the difference between the conditions and the behaviors was so far off that you just couldn't actually expect them to be able to do anything.
So in other words, like they take someone's blood pressure, they would read about it instead of actually doing it.
Well, they would tell you how they would do it. Okay, tell me how you would take a blood pressure reading. But they hadn't actually done a blood pressure reading. It'd be like telling someone, tell me how you're going to do CPR, but you've never done chest compressions. And yeah, okay. So we went back and looked at it, and there were so many things like that. And once we shook it a little bit and said, no, you got to do clinicals. You have to do clinical on all these things so that you can certify these people can do these things.
And that's what a condition is. It's in the clinical setting, provide apparatus.
So give it a patient, right? I mean, that was the big missing condition, was there was no patient. So these poor learners were like, okay, well, this abstract thing I'm taking blood pressure on. And take that all the way through, right? And you would not be believing the difference in the outcomes once they turned this little piece around. Now it's an incredible program. And they're turning out really qualified people because it finally snapped in them. Okay, now I get it. I mean, it wasn't their fault. They weren't experienced designers. They were doing the best they could. But once we forensically went in and looked at it, conditions, it was all about what they were given to work with. Don't give me 500 words on blood pressure. Show me you can do it. And this goes to certification, too. In certification, you're going to have all these things that people are able to demonstrate to be able to do. So I don't know. Condition is like this poor little person sitting in a corner just waiting to be recognized. And it's incredibly important. And it really is. So if this your first couple of times thinking about this in instructional design, behavioral objectives, think about conditions. What are you going to give them to be successful? What are you going to give them to be able to work with so they can demonstrate their ability to do something? Really powerful stuff. And then we get into degree. And this is another thing that just doesn't appear in most objectives, is how well should someone be able to do something? Can they do it 100% of the time? Can they do it 1 out of 2? Can they do it 2 out of 3? And this goes back to the other thing that you'll find, and we've talked about in other videos, Denise, is this content mastery continuum. So where are your learners on your scale from novice to expert? When they're novices, you're a little bit more considerate of this. Okay, I just need them to show me they can do it every second or third time. Demonstrate you can do it. But when they're going to be certified or when they're supposed to be an expert, they need to do it every time. Right?
It reminds me of you've given examples of, heart surgeon. You certainly want to make sure that they do this to 100% accuracy. Not
that's what I'm going for.
Not like 1 out of 3 tries, just we definitely want them to be 100% accurate. And
so I can't tell you. I mean, I can't even tell you some of these stories, more truck stories. But this notion of, okay, you call a paramedic or an EMT and, they need to do chest compressions because we have a code. And well, I've never really done it on somebody that looked like that, like in a position the body's in, or there's all these variables. It's not just you go in and do it sometimes. You have to prepare the body and you have to do all these things. Body, the patient, whatever you'd like to call them. Mm. And that's about degree. If I can write 500 words, okay, that's terrific. But once again, it goes back to conditions and behaviors. All these things are married together in this objective thing. And they all rely on each other for you to have a good outcome when you design a course.
Yeah. So let's give folks an example of what ABCD elements would look like written out, because they do not have to be in the order of ABCD, right?
No, generally they aren't. That's the other thing that the novice students look at me and say, well, why do you have ABCD if that's not the way you write them? Right. So usually start with conditions, usually go to audience, then you have behavior, then degree. So the 602 student, right? That's your audience. Your behavior should be able to define what the 4 parts of a behavioral objective are. Given a tremendous video on instructional design from the ground up and readings of the textbook, and they should be able to do this at least once out of 2 attempts. So how we write that? Okay, given a video in a textbook and a discussion, the 602 student should be able to demonstrate the ability to write a 4-part objective once in 2 attempts.
There you have it, folks. That's what it is. ABCD elements, behavioral objectives, super important in the world of ISD, necessary for professional ISD work. And so, yeah, just keep going over this video. If you've
watched this several times, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you'd like for us to go into more detail, we're trying to keep this one a little bit short. But if there's any of these elements that you would like for us to blow up and go into more depth about, please tell us that, because we're happy to do that. So I think Denise, 150 on behavioral objectives, like, wow, I wish we had like fireworks or something. But.
I know. Well, maybe I can find some and I don't know, figure it out. When we post this on LinkedIn, we'll put some fireworks in our post.
Yeah, we'll put fireworks up on it. But thank you so much for being part of this family we have on here. We really do appreciate it. And Denise, off we go.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.